Why, hello there, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. My name is Mr. Dogbot333, and welcome back to Hearts of Iron 4, The New Order as the United States of Brazil. Now, last time we were here together, we did pretty damn well in all the elections. And with that in mind, we are going, and Adhemar has decided to try to shoot for a second term. Now, this is going to have a couple hang-ups that come with it, but we'll just have to see if we can avoid some of those hang-ups. In the meanwhile, I had a reload and autosave. I've had a weird thing kick off recently. As these updates come out, I think it's been after, it hasn't been even after an update, I think. Just, when I save at the end, the saves end up being corrupted. And I don't know what's up with that. I'll set itself up as temporary files. I don't know if that's an issue with the mod right now, or if that's just a something else going on. I do not know. It is all beyond my pay grade. But I reloaded a save. I did the same autofocuses that I did. I may have also done one of the poverty ones, I'll be real. Just to keep that poverty rate decreasing a little bit more. And here we are now, a couple days in. Still have the vote passing going on. Now let's go ahead. Let's start the timer. Get another focus going in. All men. Fuck. Just banged my knee on my desk. Anyway. Now that I'm done with the whinging and all the pussy shit. Let's get on to it. All men left behind. And now Adhemar's come with this program of his, No Man Left Behind. What a pointless title. If he was honest, he would have titled after his friends, those Germans. What do we have here? A small little portion of land, I'm just noticing, between Suriname and the French. Interesting. You may call me the crow, but I tell you, it's better be a crow than a snake. Lacerda took a deep breath. He knew very well what Adhemar was doing at this point. He knew the corruption behind the scenes. He knew everything. Of course, this program is supposed to help the common man, but I tell you, what is the point for the common man of a job when they are paid a pittance? All while Adhemar continues to gain suspiciously more money. I haven't even started on inflation. Dear God, the inflation he's caused. We thought that Kubitschek did was horrific. Looking at the product of Adhemar's actions, all I can say is that it's disheartening to see our nation suffer in the hands of a greedy man. Why die for Adhemar? Now I have a feeling we are going to be in a crisis starting soon. What that crisis will entail, I'm not sure yet, but... Oh. Oh, I read that one last video, I believe. What's with the color of a Niger? Because it's the same color as Free France, right? I'm not tripping. As the sun shone brightly on Sao Paulo, Leonor Mendes de Barros quickly glanced at her schedule while enjoying a quick breakfast. A trip to an orphanage before returning to give a speech for Sao Paulo Law School as one of its teachers, and then a photo op of her husband at a picnic. Her husband certainly knew how to keep her busy, she thought, chuckling before hearing a knock on the door. Finishing her coffee, she adjusted her jewelry before stepping into a black limousine in the driveway of their home. Adhemar had always been a busy person himself, never content to sit still even for a moment. She knew that he always meant well for the people of Sao Paulo, and that's why she loved him in the first place. His dedication and kindness to the people of Sao Paulo was shown through his philanthropy before he was elected as mayor. Such acts ensured that Adhemar had vast popularity in Sao Paulo, giving the PSP its base for the past decade among Brazil's poor citizens and most conservative elites. But of course, Leonor was right there by his side. She did a war for him, though. Even though it had barely been a year into his first 5-year term, Adhemar had already begun drawing up plans for the next decade. As much as he pushed himself constantly, Leonor worried that he wasn't taking enough time for himself. As the Sao Paulo cityscape grew closer and closer in the window, she knew that she would still support him, no matter his crazy plans or how crazy his plans or antics got. Small grin crept up her face as she stepped out of the car, facing a decrepit orphanage. She could still see the little faces of children, abandoned, staring at her with big eyes and wide smiles, where there were hands waving enthusiastically of the First Lady of Brazil. If Adhemar wasn't done helping these children, then neither was she. And Leonor Mendes de Barros knew she had a critical role to play in ensuring Brazil's future would be better not just for these children, but for everyone. The mother of PSP will care for all. From their vantage point by the recording tape, Silva had spent the hour boasting to Marcelo Dami, a respected younger colleague in the nuclear fields, about how chaotic the birds and insects were, as workers began clearing space for device assembly facility. How bravely the guards fought jaguars and caimans as the trucks came in, and how quickly the geologists surveyed every nook and cranny of the entire mountain. In fact, that should be their lead. Down the repurposed mining pit, inspecting a rock sample, the head geologist was wearing cargo pants and a light safari jacket. Beside him, Lotto Natel was battling mosquitoes that were happy to see humans back in the area. But before Silva could wave to the pair below, Dami's sudden question interrupted him. Do you trust them? Silva knew he felt what was coming. I assume you have concerns. You've dealt with governments a lot longer than I have. You should know everything they touch becomes impure. Someone might steal from something trivial like the geological survey, maybe promising a few researchers a piece of the cut if they took a day off. A single groundwater leak, and we have a radiation crisis on our hands. I apologize for the tone, sir, but shouldn't we be a little more prudent when building? Dammy rolled his arms, finishing the word from his throat. Bombs. Now, what exactly could Silva say to that? Making nukes for Brazil meant making nukes for Brazilian politicians. Silva decided long ago that all he could do was have faith. Marcelo, we've worked together on various projects for years. You have every right to raise your doubts, but please. Silva opened the door to a trailer motion for him to enter. Quit with the conspiracies. I'm not sure I know what the conspiracy is supposed to be here. Well, financial crisis in Nanjing, interesting. It seems pretty clear to me. How are our projects doing? Let's put full focus on our land reform. It'll take 3.5 years. Adhemar's better than Vargas. Let's invest into the Amazonian territories. The PSP is always in search of new people to bring its message to. What better place to look for them than the very depths of the Amazon? The rainforest is a wild and untamed part of our nation, one that for far too long has been gone ignored and underdeveloped. Well, no more. We shall make it our business to burrow deep into the Amazon and bring our message to these poor, unnoticed people. Lesser men have been content to leave these territories as underdeveloped and far ignored as they are for far too long. Fear not, O Amazonians. President Adhemar is here. For you. I'm not fully convinced we'll be able to make it all the way down to the end of his focus tree. Though some of these are illiterates trustworthy. I wonder. A new parliament. An organic constitution. These are kind of wild. Unambiguously. Let's expand some more logging. What does it matter? Who cares what future generations have to say? The present generations are what matters. We need the big number to go up. Our economy is a fucking mess, unsurprisingly. Even though I cut down on all of his expenditure, we still have a deficit. The inflation is fucking crazy. 38%, my god. Our economy is still growing and keeping up with it, which is nice, but at what cost? And yeah. There's no shock that we didn't make those expectations. The death of the Tsar. Let's go ahead and make these areas states. We have brought the light of our republic to the Amazon. Hooray! They are now all true citizens of the republic, truly tear-jerking like watching a child one has known since infancy growing into a strong, self-sufficient man. To commemorate his glorious occasion, we'll turn these territories into full-on states already. We have our best men from the PSP drawing electoral boundaries and volunteering to act as senators for the newly created states. Elections will not be held immediately, of course. It should be simply impractical to do so. Our men shall stay until the next election, wherein the people of these states can decide where they keep them in power. Is that not the beauty of democracy? Lacerda was alone in the dim, gloomy room at first. At half hour, he was surprised when Brazzola came through the door, followed 10 minutes later by Neves. Unmarked cars? Through the service entrance. Lacerda asked him. Each of them nodded in turn. So, Lacerda thought, the opposition leaders of Brazil are brought to the U.S. Embassy in the middle of the night in separate unmarked cars from predetermined positions around the city. What for? What could merit such skullduggery? His contemplation was answered when the door opened again and black-suited shadowy forms spilled in and took the seats opposite the opposition. The glow of cigarette lighters briefly illuminated a scarred-browed here, a speckled face there, the smoke meddling with the shadows. A silence dominated the room. Neves and Brazzola fidgeted while Lacerda observed with rapt attention. He had an idea of what the shadow man across from him was going to do before it happened. A manila folder slid towards Lacerda. As he leaned forward and opened it, Brazzola and Neves crowded close to see the Polaroids enclosed within. Countless members of the Adhemar administration were cast in black and white indiscretion. Shaking hands with German officials, receiving fat envelopes, lips frozen in the act of spilling secrets. Lacerda felt rage building in his chest. He'd told them. He'd warned them over and over again. The government was infested with Nazi rats. But Lacerda felt something else, too. Righteousness, vindication, elation. While his warnings may fall on deaf ears, his need for crusade was being fulfilled this very moment. He knew in the coming hours and days he would need to rally his remaining allies in the UDN and the press for a sustained spirit campaign against President Adhemar. President Adhemar. Lacerda couldn't even think the title without gagging. If everything went according to plan, Lacerda need not stomach the indignation much longer. Civilian factories, let's get working on... Should probably do some prisons. Let's do some admin offices, actually. I'll get working on those, and then we'll queue up some prisons. There we go. Oh, look at that. I didn't realize this was a thing. Interesting. Carlos Lacerda stood at the podium. Ooh. As flash bulbs flickered and the camera rolled. Thank you all for coming on short notice. I have news to share with the country of dramatic importance. Lacerda gripped at the redacted dossier in his left hand, hidden in a plain manila envelope, as much of it was by the censor's pen. I have in my hands a list of German R&D agents that have cultivated high-level sources within the Brazilian government. This will include copies of intelligence reports passed from multiple ministries and agencies, including the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Department of Public Security, and the Ministry of Defense. Lacerda remembered when he had received the full dossier. It hadn't been from the usual SIS intermediary, but the gentleman in question had clearly been an American. He called himself Mr. Cinza, a name that Lacerda already knew was false, and positioned himself as a being from American intelligence, and proffered no further clarifying details on the subject. As Mr. Cinza said, he was unimportant. The people who truly mattered were those who had been turned assets for the Reich. For both of their country's interests, Mr. Cinza had said, Lacerda needed to have those documents. I call for nothing less than the full enforcement of the law. These individuals must be arrested and tried for their treasonous crimes against the people of Brazil. I further call on these wrong citizens of Brazil to question how and why so many members of the Adhemar and government would so willingly sell their homeland for Nazi gold. One of the journalists for Fallout raised her hand to ask Lacerda a question. Could you tell us the source of this information? Lacerda smiled, but shook his head. The source is anonymous in the interest of her safety, but the threat is very real. The next day, a wave of protests hit the street. Oh boy. No one had ever said the president couldn't enjoy a few extra hours of comfort in his bed. After all, the election season isn't the most relaxing time in a man's life. Unfortunately, all good things, no matter how small, must come to an end. Duty awaits. Brazil waits. The morning started as every other one, a quick visit to the bathroom, followed by breakfast to get the day going. Yet today it wasn't the coffee that got President Adhemar de Barros on his feet, but the newspaper that was resting next to his plate, and the dreadful words featured on its front page. German influence in Brazil. Adhemar's government on German payroll. An obvious lie, Adhemar thought to himself, but it would also be a lie to say that the matter of relations with Germany wasn't frequently on his mind. Adhemar rushed out of the bedroom, really headed towards his office. He passed by countless advisors and colleagues on this way. Calls for continually friendly relations with the Reich, accusations of merely replacing the American eagle with a German one, demands and advice all melted into a single buzz. Chaos followed him right up to the presidential office and was intensifying with every second, fighting for the president's attention. A man couldn't hear his thoughts in such an environment, let alone decide the fate of the country. With the president's request to leave his office still echoing in the halls, the crowds of advisors disbanded, and only a small pair of eyes were left looking at him. One that belonged to the framed portrait of Washington Luis. His face pierced Adhemar right through. Finally, alone with his thoughts, only one thing remained on Adhemar's mind. What to do? What to do? There has been unusual escalation of American intelligence operations on the South American continent and within Brazilian territory in particular. These intelligence operations are conducted under the purview of the American Foreign Intelligence Services, the CIA, and do not appear to be under the same size and scope as previous American intelligence operations conducted under the standard partnership between the FBI and its child organization, the SIS. The presence of these new intelligence operations undoubtedly presents a significant risk to Brazilian-American relations. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs is undoubtedly constrained in its approach to addressing the issue. Ostensibly, the CIA and Brazil's government are allied in their desire to contain German intelligence encroachment upon the South American continent. But there is an unmistakable affront to our sovereignty when American intelligence operatives can act with impunity in Brazilian territory. Exposing these operations only serve to undermine our currently existing intelligence relationship with the U.S., and given their objective is to undermine German intelligence networks on the South American continent, and they have so far avoided targeting our own counterintelligence operations in theater, the SFICI has elected to suppress knowledge of these operations and restrict any reporting of these activities to the highest level classification and need to know. We shall restrict ourselves to observations for the immediate future in the interest of preserving Brazilian-American relations and as a further level of plausible deniability against German R&D operations. If we ignore it, it can't hurt us. Right? Right? Oh, Philly Heart. Let's update that new equipment. Let's take a look at elections. Rama should be here. The rest of these as well. Are these not going to pop up? Adhemar looked at the collective members of his closest advisors could feel the nervous energy in the air. More than a few looked disheveled, lacking sleep, showers, or both. A few were absent or left uninvited. The foreign minister for one, a likely Udian asset, and Edna, of course. But even amongst his most loyal supporters, Laudo and the PSP, morale was dropping. Something had to be done. They needed to know that their commander still had a plan, that the wily salesman still had a few tricks up his sleeve. Trying to cover up his own anxiety with bold pronouncements, Adhemar began to speak. I understand that we're all caught off by recent events, but the situation is being handled. At least now we know who our enemies are. The lists are being drawn up, and these criminals and traitors will face our wrath. Especially Filinto Mueller. He'll get what's coming to him. You can count on that. A few nods of support. And the leaker, she will be caught and her libel quelled. Light jeers rang in the small room. After a few minutes of this back and forth, Adhemar slipped the bad news. Unfortunately, I will be retiring to Sao Paulo for a time to ensure the loyalty of the bosses. I believe all of you will keep everything in order. Trust not in your abilities, but the truth that we represent the will of the Brazilian people. No matter what the papers say, we are the future of the country. Silence returned, a dozen blank faces and 24 hollow eyes. Then Laudo, always loyal, stood up and began to furiously clap. Reluctantly, the rest of the room followed him, and soon the whole building was filled with the empty noise of false applause. Well, let's show to everyone how Adhemar is better than Vargas. Because really, Vargas was a great man. This is something nobody's denying. We all love Vargas. However, like every great man throughout history had his flaws, Vargas could be ruthless towards his enemies, perhaps unduly so. He sent the lover of a communist leader to Nazi Germany. Did he really? Holy shit. He allowed his political opposition to languish in prison, many of whom were in our very party. To top it all off, Vargas stood side by side with the military in the Constitutionalist revolt, while Adhemar opposed him alongside the Paulistas. We know that Vargas was good, but Adhemar is great, and it's only right that we let everyone know. Interviews, books, pamphlets, whatever it takes. The truth will get out. I mean, if you so this is progressivism. Social. Is there even socialism support right now? Sitting in the booth above the track, President Adhemar could barely hear his own thoughts past the roaring of the race cars. The Interlagos circuit, one of the many gifts he left to the city of Sao Paulo, proved to be a convenient location for his meeting with Paulo Maluf, one of the leading oligarchs in the city, but he was beginning to regret this choice. You must understand, Mr. Maluf, it's all under control, he yelled, his voice throat hoarse, beer-flavored spittle, flying in all directions. He could count on loyalty from the oligarchs. They favored the status quo over whatever the malcontents were offering up. But in times of crisis, it was useful for the king to send from his throne. Do worry, Mr. Apollo stands. You. Adhemar could only hear snippets of Apollo's words above the droning of the motor cars. Speak up, man! I can't hear you. I said, Sao Paulo stands with you, sir. Your loyalty will be remembered. But why don't we continue this talk after the match is over? But sir, the race ended 5 minutes ago. Adhemar looked out the window and his gut sank. Paulo was right. The track was empty. The car stopped. The race was over. But the buzzing, it won't end. Oh God. Oh God, please help. My head is on fire. Uh-oh. Guys, I don't think this is good. This was not a time to swagger around, nor to make demands. This was a time to ask Lord on high for guidance. Adhemar accordingly ditched his past persona and returned to something near himself, the person he knew God could see at all times. Thus, the Adhemar that walked into the Church of Our Lady of Aparecida would not be recognizable to anyone but his family members and perhaps Laudo and Natel. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed by thy name. Direct, we beseech you, O Lord, our actions. He muttered, and meant it, for he was so out of ideas of how to deal with the crisis that he had to have recourse with God. At last, a sort of inspiration came, and he sat up. He looked around and saw scaffolding. Above him, an ornate chandelier was being installed, or at the other end of the nave, beyond a closed-off area, a sculptor was working on the finishing touches of a statue. Adhemar felt pride sweltering in his chest. That was thanks to the government, and to Brazil's most productive citizens. This is strange, Adhemar thought as he stepped to leave. There's pain in my chest, not pride. What's going on? He kept wondering what was going on until he entered the vestibule, thinking, that's strange. I don't remember eating anything. I can't have been poisoned. Wait, I feel lightheaded now. Parishioners looked on in horror as Adhemar Pereira de Barros, president of the United States of Brazil, fell flat on his face and became unresponsive. Some looked on, frozen in horror, as the security swarmed. Others followed police officers outside as a cordon was formed. As the clergy of a shrine approached in confusion, a security guard shouted at them, "Get me an ambulance and the concentrated oils!" On days like this, Lotto Natel cursed the inability of the photograph to fully capture someone's likeness. He squinted at a grainy phone of a woman wearing a heavy-set coat and a hat that had been taken in Brasilia itself. He had it on decent authority that she could very well be that snake in the grass, Liana Clemente, but only God knew whether it was or not. She had a similar facial structure, admittedly, but looked far too tall. But then again, that may simply have been a matter of camera angle. He sighed, throwing the book back onto the pile. The search felt fruitless. The Germans had well and truly done well in finding someone who could strike the administration and quickly slip away, should she have been discovered. It was a wild goose chase in every sense of the word. Suddenly the phone rang. Natel picked up. Before he could get a word out, he was cut off by a frantic shouting, Getulio Vargas Jr. "Lotto! It's the president! He's fallen into a coma, and my doctors don't know whether he'll wake up." Time slowed down as Natel's eyes widened. "My God," he said, running his hand through his hair. A million questions flooded through his head. When did this happen? What caused it? With Clemente on the loose, it could damn well have been her work, and she was something I could not entirely rule out, but those were the details he could deal with later. For now on, he had one concern. Do we know the UDN and PSD's stance on this? And it's almost certainly knowing the answer. No, but realistically, they'll be practically fucking slavering at the mouth to impeach the president, the load of damnable, stupid, small-minded bastards. And there it was. It seemed that the fate of Adhemar's legacy would be falling to him to defend. Gritting his teeth, Natel replied, "I'll be there soon. Remember, we must stay united, no matter what." This is not good. A new focus tree will be unlocked. Oh no. Lotto Natel wishes he could go back to saner days. Instead, he lives in interesting times. The PSP was in power. In power is a different beast to what it was when he had joined. A party that Natel had been perfectly satisfied to support at first later became more and more a source of frustration and mistrust, as Natel was forced to clean up its messes. Then Adhemar's proved himself to be not as trustworthy as Lotto would have wanted. But now it is do or die, succeed or fail. If now Adhemar sinks and the PSP loses power, they could all potentially fall into the abyss. Benjamin Franklin spoke rightly. We must all hang together, lest we hang separately. For now, they stay together. After the crisis, on the other hand, Natel can force the PSP and its government to reckon with their past mistakes. Well, the puppet master is out. Adhemar de Barros has slipped into coma and has shown no signs of waking up from it soon. Only sleeps our government has been immobilized by crippling fear and confusion. The same cannot be said of our enemies. The opposition has submitted a bill to the Senado introducing articles of impeachment, and the PSP is in no shape to mount a serious opposition to them. There is no doubt that quick action must be taken in order to bring Brazil out of the chaos that it is consuming it whole. The only question is who will be the ones to lead the nation out of the crisis. So it looks like we have... This would call in some friends to save the bill, I think. This would be if we're just going to get Vargas out. Is it? Time to slaughter the bull. Yeah. Oh, boy. Antonio Vidal's typed with a rapid fury he had not experienced before. The keys on the typewriter rattled like a machine gun under his fingers, a one-man firing squad. With every passing hour, a new scandal seemed to emerge, a new gaffe to report, another one of DeBarros' pawns cast aside. His fingers ached and eyes hung heavy, but Vidal could not stop, and until Adhemar's career was given its long overdue execution. General Quadros leaned back in the leather chair, staring through blurred visions at the jittering TV screen, and smiled. It had been long since the news broke, but his room was already filthy, covered in discarded bottles and smudged newspapers. Quadros' addled mind could only understand a fraction of what the pundit was saying, but the meeting went down as smooth as a glass of whiskey. Adhemar was thrilled, and that deserved a celebration. Carlos Lacerda scrambled around his room, searching for his watch. The cord of the telephone wrapped around the corner as he tried in vain to communicate to the Brasilia Hotel the urgency of the situation. "You'll get me that goddamn room, or some of the local reviewers will have your head," he said, slamming the phone down. Fuck it. He didn't need to watch. Now was the only time that mattered. Lacerda practically leaped out of the door, slamming it behind him, his suit disheveled and hair ungroomed. He didn't care. At this moment, the only thing of relevance for the crow was his prey, and he needed to be fast about it because soon enough, all the scavengers in the capital would be clawing for a piece of Adhemar de Barros. So it doesn't look like any of these states actually get PSP support, or actually are integrated. Tancredo Neves and Ulysses Guimaraes were nearly seen next to each other, let alone rushing through the corridors of a chamber of deputies with the same copy of a bill, let alone with stamps of rare approval from the PSD and UDN offices at once. But it was a rare occasion. As he jostled between senators moving one way or the other to the main floor, two nemesis would be handling in the same paper the chamber president to get rid of a third. If a cabinet will not fulfill their obligation to this nation, then we in Congress must defend the Republic from their mistakes. Guimaraes faced the rest of the floor, heaving in breath for the next line. That is why myself and Mr. Neves have tabled a bill to impeach the president of Brazil and do what is right by the Brazilian people. Booing emerged from the PSP's side of the floor and applause from the opposite end of the room. The rest of Guimaraes' speech would be clouded by whispers from deputy to deputy, anxious flitting of attention to the shifting men in the background of the room. The beginning of a new power struggle yet again underway. Nadella watched on in perfect stillness. The rumors of ousting and outmaneuvering reached even his own ears. The idea that PSP would be uprooted by Congress's decrees, playing even on the conscience of his advisors. But he couldn't let that happen. He was the vice president, now acting president, and he had a job to do. They would learn you couldn't just overturn Adhemar's legacy in a week. The PSP is not out of power yet. So Adhemar de Barros' impeachment will be introduced to the Senado. Fuck, I can't speak right now. Someone gave me the same poison Adhemar got, or whatever happened to him. If passed, he will be introduced to the Senado. Discussion on the bill will be put aside going any ongoing matters. This act, proposed by Ulysses Guimaraes of the Chamber of Deputies, calls for impeachment of President Adhemar de Barros due to the president falling into a coma. This notion lacks a head of state to lead it, and instead being run by Lado Natel, the chief of staff. This is blatantly unconstitutional, must be stopped. As the Constitution holds no mechanism to remove a president capable of fulfilling their duties, the legislative chambers will remove President Barros. Fuck it. I'm taking this out on the Amazon. Okay. Shit, this is what we choose, where we choose. What, oh what would we want to do? Well, let's figure this out. It wasn't supposed to go like this. Loud and Natel couldn't focus, as he heard the rest of Adhemar's cabinet bicker at the table around him. Behind him. His thoughts continued to race in the mind. Would Adhemar wake up soon? Would the PSP finally unite behind him, and ensure that Adhemar still had presidency to return to? He tried to remember everything that Adhemar taught him, everything that he'd been told. If there was one person to rally the PSP, it had to be him. Some phone calls needed to be made, and if the PSP was to survive this crisis. Natel turned around to the table and began dialing a number. As he put the receiver to his ear, Natel prayed the special coffers hadn't run dry yet. On the opposite side of the country, Tancredo Neves waited outside the National Congress building. He hadn't expected so much support in the Senado after introducing articles of impeachment, but he wasn't going to complain about it. There was still work to be done, of course. Calls that needed to be made to Brizola and Kupachek in the morning to ensure the stain of the PSP would be erased from the presidency. The rot of corruption had infected Brazil, but it wasn't terminal. As a smile crept up Neves' face, his determination to see Adhemar and the PSP removed from power had only hardened. As night turned to day, the fate of Brazil's future lay in the hands of Natel and Neves. Both men knew that only one could come out on top. Well, you know what? The PSP is weakened, but not yet lost. Time to call some friends. Last we checked, our party still holds many seats and levers of government power throughout the current government. So what if Adhemar's unable to govern in the current crisis? We need to pick up the slack right now and get to work. We need to hit the ground running right now to ensure that Adhemar will still have his presidency to return to when he recovers. Everyone in the PSP owes the president that much. At least, even if we all don't agree with every action, every bill that has been passed. The last thing we can afford right now is for those opposition jackals to steal the presidency from us in this time of unrest. and for them to start poking their noses into business they don't belong in. Our war chests have been diminished, but it is far from empty. Whenever someone wants to introduce the articles of impeachment to the Senado, let him. We still have some tricks up our sleeves. We'll start introducing some briefcases filled to the brim with Uzeros to our fellow countrymen. Let's see how their tune changes about our president. Adhemar inhaled deeply, feeling himself rise from his bed. His eyes flickered rapidly across the room. It seemed to be a hospital. Feeling tubes of all sorts intruding upon his nose, he ripped them out, getting out of bed. "Hello?" He called, hoping that one of the nurses would come to inform him of what had happened, but he received no response. Frowning, he poked his head out of the hallway into the hospital. It was empty. Medical equipment lay strewn everywhere, as if the entire hospital had simply disappeared midway through whatever task they were doing. The floor was cold on his feet, and the hospital gown was uncomfortable. Walking through the empty hallway, he eventually came across a bright red door, and did not feel the aesthetic of the rest of the building. Curious, he opened it, only to see the president's office, exactly as he remembered it. Trying not to gasp, Adhemar briefly wondered if he was dreaming. He walked through it, idly running his hands across the desk. Same texture, he remembered. Across the room, Adhemar spotted another red door. As if he was attracted to it, he walked right up to it and opened it. To his surprise, he was met with a Senate room. Funny, he did not think they were connected. Then again, his office was never connected to an empty hospital either. He walked through, admiring the room, yet it was entirely too empty. Spying another red door, Adhemar went through it, this time to a familiar street in Sao Paulo. He remembered the street, the smells, the sounds, they were all here, yet once more not a single soul. He wandered through the streets for what felt like eternity, soaking in the familiar sights. Eventually, the streets were no longer familiar, and he found himself standing in an empty, grassy field. Empty, if he did not count the figures sitting alone at the table in front of him, that is. He approached. At that table was a deck of playing cards. The figure looked up at him, grinning. "Hello there, friend," it said softly. "Care for a game?" Well, the three military men loomed in front of Lotto, their stony faces obscured by the tobacco smoke hovering in the air, barely considering the glare they took from one of the most powerful men in the country begging for their help. They had extended the talks out this long, no doubt, just to watch him squeal. It was no matter. Lotto was here for results, not respect. The military would assist with stopping the impeachment. Perhaps the disaster could be salvaged. Lighting another cigarette, Lotto continued his proposal. As you know, the forces arrayed against our president would stop at nothing to see the country bend over for the communists, or worse. Adhemar is the one thing that stands between the civilian honor of Brazil and total chaos. You speak of honor? Commander Medici smirked, taking a comically large cigar from beneath his desk. And yet you can't deny the actions of our dear president who made us the laughingstock of the world. He continued, lighting the tobacco and blowing a puff in Lotto's direction. I'm speaking about the integrity of nation, its continued survival, not just a few tabloid headlines. Lotto replied, his eyes watering from smoke. General Ford nodded with faux understanding. We understand your predicament, Mr. Natal, but the military does not concern itself with petty politics. A bald-faced lie, but at least they were implying neutrality. Assurances not to launch a coup would be a small victory, at least. So I take it that no move will be made against the president? Lotto asked bluntly. General Gazelle leaned forward, his giant glasses unleashing a blinding reflection of white light. Why, my dear Mr. Natal, wherever would you have gotten that idea in your head? We would never think to overturn the constitutional order. Leaning closer, he smiled, yellow teeth illuminating a cigar flame. Can our president say the same? Well, let's maintain unity of the SP. Adhemar's coma set in the party in complete nosedive. While PSP centrists are still willing to back Natal in the party, the two ideological wings of the party have completely fallen apart. Remo de Campos Fergal is leading the PSP's left and calling for additional agrarian reform and direct investments in local business in order to combat foreign capital from pushing Brazilians out of their hardworking jobs. Meanwhile, João Café-Filho on our right flank has called for austerity by cutting social spending, pointing to the ballooning national debt as a ticking time bomb. Nantel is going to have to choose a side between the two if he has any hope of getting more votes and keeping the party's image. It won't be just the other PSP who notice who he sides with. The other parties will also notice a shift in policy, and perhaps will have their own opinions on it. Well, shit. A ring of her office's phone. The news hit her like a train. Adhemar's in a coma, and now the country was in Edna's hands. Leaving her office and going straight to the Senate chambers, where proceedings had already started for drafting solutions to the crisis. Adhemar was rotting while still alive. Only time would tell if he would escape his doom. As she took her first steps in the chamber, she found Tancredo, who told her they had already started drafting plans to impeach Adhemar. Nervous and unsure of what to do, she joined the small group to hear what their leader Brazola has to say. Adhemar is clearly incapable of leading the nation any longer. Even if he wakes up, who's there to ensure he won't fall into a coma again? Brazil needs people who are physically capable of leading the nation for the presidency, and Adhemar is not one of them. All those who oppose Adhemar were there. Brazola, Neves, Guimarães. They knew the bull's days had passed and it was time to remove him from his post. Don't worry, Edna. Even Lacerda wants to help us. Adhemar is going to go sooner or later. Congress is in session. Impeachment hearings on President Adhemar have commenced. Well, it looks like our relations have met, are locked in with Edna and Adhemar. The figure's face was both indecipherable and frighteningly familiar. Adhemar squinted briefly, trying to make out its face. It shifted from one to another in a matter of seconds. Gender to gender, ethnicity to ethnicity. Its clothing remained oddly static. A dark suit, similar to the ones that Adhemar had seen on many an occasion whilst on a seedy night of deals and debaucheries in Sao Paulo. Well, are you going to spend all day gawking at me like that? Come on. Sit down. The figure snapped, nodding towards a chair opposite him. Adhemar suddenly felt as if he had committed some grave error as he obediently sat down in front of the figure. An impressive air surrounded the figure. It was not as if the figure was trying to elicit the feeling in Adhemar, but it was passive, unshakable. Are you frightened of me, Adhemar de Barros? Who are you? Why am I here? Well, isn't that the question of the hour? I suppose you all have many names for me. It said, beginning to idly shuffle a deck of cards in its bony hands. I have been called Anubis, Thanatos, the Pale White Horseman, the Reaper. But I suppose to you, I would be known as... No, that's Morte. How the fuck do you say this? I'm getting no results. I was just gonna put in a Google Voice effect for comedic effect, but All I'm getting results of, like, cat. Catcheroo. And then the gravity of the situation hit Adhemar with full intensity. This was no mere apparition. This was the primal force of nature that every man, woman, and child spent every moment fearing. The thing lurking in the dark, death itself, was sitting before him. His breathing grew heavy, and he fell backwards on his chair. What do you want from me? Have you come to take me? Death chuckled. No. Well, not yet, at least. I'm on a very busy schedule, but I've decided to give you the benefit of the doubt. So I will be playing a game of Truco with you. If you win, I will allow you to continue living. And if not... Death slowly drew its fingers across its neck, and Mar gulped. I accept. Well, I can't think of any bigger cliffhanger to leave it on than that, so that's what I'm gonna do. I think this isn't. You're not gonna see any episodes of this until next week anyway, so have fun with that, suckers. Unless you're watching some playlist after it's already out, but yeah. All right, bye.